Hi there, I'm Pale from the Lived Perspective. I'm a white-skinned, short, red and brown-haired human with flecks of silver in red round-rimmed glasses with white beads, earphones in my ears, in a black singlet top, sitting here in a little garden seat that is still in development, with a metal bar behind, wires climbing up and vines climbing up the wires, with more garden in the background and concrete verandahs rising above. Here, coming to you from the atrium in my apartment block on the unceded lands on which I currently dwell, bringing you Mental Health Month Musings 30, Face Pocket Notes on Person-Centered Care. How you doing? Trying to catch some sun and block out a toddler somewhere in the apartment block that is quite actively cranky about the fact that they're probably being made to have an afternoon nap about now. And the earphones are in so that I can be out here catching the rays while still trying to dodge the remnants of the migraine that has chased me for the last 5 or 6 days. Being a little bit realistic about everything that I'd hoped to achieve today and how much is actually probably not going to be achieved, and taking a moment or two just to wrap this second to last post up. I want to talk today about ethics and something that is bouncing around in my head endlessly, which is the difference between clinical ethics and lived experience ethics. I spoke yesterday about structural reform and about the need to not only place lived experience at the centre of the decision making, whether it's in face-to-face service delivery or service design or policy making, or all the way up to the government discussions that we are now having, not only to place lived experience there, but to keep it there in positions of leadership and driving change, not as a reflection of, oh, we're coming to you to consult on your opinion and then we'll decide whether or not we think it's valid, possible, and whether or not we want to keep it, which is kind of where we're at the moment. But I think a big driver for doing these clinician, consumer, person-centered care scenarios is the observations that I am constantly having on the difference between lived experience ethics and clinical ethics. And I know we've certainly spoken about this a bit. Clinicians come from a perspective of, let me fix you. You are the one, obviously, with the problem. You've come to me for help. I am the expert. Therefore, let me listen to you. Let me work out what is wrong with you and let me prescribe a course of fixing. And in the non-clinical work we do as lived experience workers and advocates and service co-designers, reform workers, it's about, let me understand who you are, what you want, and how we elevate your desires and perspectives above the systemic narratives that say that there's something wrong with you and you need to be fixed. One of the things that I see a lot is buzzwords. You know, everybody has heard lived experience, everyone has heard person-centered, everyone has heard trauma-informed, the list goes on. When we have these buzzwords flying around, we quite quickly switch off. And often it's because for those of us in service delivery, there's this new thing, there's this new research, there's this new approach. We do a 4-hour in-service. We're given a whole lot of resources and then we're expected to go away and implement them. We don't deeply train in best practice. And it's certainly hard to do because we also have to work and we also have the needs in service delivery and increasing demand for it with workforce shortages and a bunch of complicating factors. But I think for me, as I sit here and I listen to so many different scenarios and I think about so many different scenarios of my own, we've got to do better than there's this new thing, here's a 4-hour training and now let's trial and error it. because this is our lives as consumers. This is the lives of the people that we're in service delivery with. Another one of those words that is very buzzwordy, and it's quite an old word, is boundaries. And as a consumer, I completely get it, because as a consumer, to me, I have seen that work very badly. This is my boundary, you will not cross it, and I don't care how distressed you are, I'm gone. That is devastating for someone that walks into a service with very justifiable emotional distress and are told that you cannot access the service because the practitioner who is providing supports feels like your behaviour is the thing that is the barrier to the service. We need to remember in service delivery that the key element to relationship is not that you're that person's friend. It doesn't matter how much altruism and goodwill and unconditional positive regard you bring into the space. If someone is emotionally distressed and it is triggering you, there is a need to remain present with that distress. But remember that it is a product of what we call lateral violence. The person who is at the centre of the emotional distress does not feel safe. And while we also don't feel safe, they have taken the risk of putting themselves in an environment where they know that they might not be safe because they have no other alternatives left. They have no other option. They have tried to cope as best as they can for as long as they can. And they've had to come somewhere that they don't really want to be, and they don't feel safe. That we don't feel safe in those environments, that's a choice we make. We go to work every day. We show up to our shifts. If we are burning out, there's another buzzword for you. We need to be checking in with ourselves and thinking about what our needs are and how best to meet our needs. But in that moment, our needs need to be put aside. This is a selfless nature of service delivery, and it is increasingly becoming a massive problem, because when we're arced up and we don't feel safe ourselves, the last thing we want to do is be selfless. However, our call, our position description, our training, our job is to be there for the person in distress. We can draw our boundaries. We can say this is not appropriate and, you won't engage with our service unless you behave in the way that we want you to. But that's about us. And we're not the one accessing the service. So in any situation where you can see that the person in front of you is highly distressed, the first question you need to ask is, how do I help this person feel safe? It's not about you. It's not about helping people in that moment to understand that there is a transactional interaction here. It's not about drawing attention to your distress or the limitations of your service or what your boss needs or what your form needs. And it's not about that in the 5-10 minutes afterwards when you've pulled someone back from the brink of distress. We live in a world where immediate gratification is one of the driving factors of our social reality. But as leaders, as practitioners, as humans that choose to care, as a professional reality that we are paid to do, regardless of how well we are paid or are not paid, we have a higher call. We have a higher set of ethics to adhere to. And when those of us with lived experience are trying to demonstrate that in the middle of our distress, by pushing you away, by telling you in alternate realities and alternate ways, psychosis, anger, rage, self-harm, that we don't feel safe and you are the product of our distress in this moment, we have got to rise above. It hurts me, it breaks my heart to have been both a clinician, or not a clinician but a worker, and a consumer in this space, because I know both sides. And I guess the gift of DID is that I have the ability to see a lot of different angles. because there are a lot of different parts of me that see the world from different perspectives. My hope is that into our future, as we build into reform, we not only put lived experience at the centre of the conversation, but we help to use that lived experience to break down the walls and break down the barriers and recognise that we're all in situations where we don't feel safe because the way that this has structurally been designed embeds these realities. But that's a big work. So a heavy one, but I guess the rationale for why I wanted to do this. We need as consumers, for you as service providers to understand that we are the vulnerable ones in this scenario. And we as practitioners need to remember that the consumer, when they are lashing out against us, are lashing out against the system that has embedded the worldview that we as the practitioners are right and the consumer is wrong. Tomorrow I'll give you more context as to why we're moving on and what's next and where to find us and what's happening and all the rest of it. But for now, I want to leave you with this little piece of wisdom that I heard from Louise Byrne in an interview fairly recently. She's one of our big lived experience researchers and leaders in the reform sector. People with lived experience have an authenticity meter, and they can pretty quickly work out whether or not they're safe in an interaction with a clinical worker. Catch you on the flip side.